sure, maybe we can't deliver it exactly the way we've been delivering it, but we could deliver something new that ultimately achieves those goals. You could save money, you could reduce costs. Now you're putting maybe something new out there in front of the guests. And so to say you can't do something is just, I guess, it's just not a word that I hang on to.
Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman, founder of BackLooper. I help attractions collect guest feedback and identify top priorities needed for improvement.
And I'm Matt Heller, founder of Performance Optimist Consulting. I help leaders lead so they can increase employee engagement and retention.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the AttractionPros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Well, you know, it's
I have no idea.
Fantastic. Then you haven't been listening.
No, clearly I haven't. No, glad you're fantastic. So am I, actually. I'm really excited for our guest today.
Sharon Aguillen is the president of TCB Productions, LLC, but has a long history in the attractions industry, SeaWorld, Darien Lake, a smaller FEC, but really started as an entertainer, as a dancer.
Yeah. And now she, like you said, spent several years, with, like you said, Darien Lake, and then with SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. But prior to that, when it was Bush Entertainment Company. And then just recently, in the last couple of years, she launched her own business. And like you said, TCB Productions. And she gets to work with parks and attractions and be able to help consult from an entertainment production standpoint.
And you know what I think is really cool is I got to speak with her during CEO Speaks during IAPA. And, a lot of that conversation was about COVID, and probably rightfully so. But we get to hear a little bit about that here today, but a lot about her experience with Busch Gardens and kind of how she came up through. And I'm always fascinated to hear how people got where they are, right? Mm-hmm. Starting as a dancer and the series of events that had to happen, like a friend of hers telling you, yeah, you should go apply at Bush, right? And that's kind of what launched a very long and very prosperous career. So I love hearing about those things and can't wait to get to that so everybody else can hear it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's really interesting how one small thing, and when we look back to, many other interviews that we've done, it usually started with something like that of, oh, I got a summer job, or this person recommended I do this. And it's cool to kind of connect all those dots, and looking forward to hearing Sharon's story and where she is now and what she's up to today.
I say, let's get to it.
Let's get to it.
Sharon Aguillen, president of TCB Productions. Thank you so much for joining us today on the AttractionPros podcast. Sharon, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Matt and Josh. And Matt, kudos to you for pronouncing my married name correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had to do it for CEO Speaks a few weeks ago. So I wrote it down and I remembered. So I'm glad I was able to remember that. So Sharon, if you could tell us a little bit about your background. I know you were at SeaWorld for a long time and now you run your own production company. So just kind of give us the rundown of who Sharon is.
Oh my goodness, like where it all started, right? So I'm originally from Niagara Falls, New York, and I grew up basically in a dance studio. I, took dance, tap, jazz, ballet from the time I was about 2.5 until I moved from there, honestly. And throughout the course of that, I was always around stage and entertainment, and ended up going to school for dance and technical theater. So I kind of married and mixed both of those disciplines. And one semester, I was probably a junior in college, and a good friend of mine was also in the theater program. And he was talking to me about, what are you going to do this summer? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll probably go back and work at one of the local theaters that's in and around the area where I grew up. And he said to me, why don't you send your resume to Busch Gardens and come work there with me for the summer? And so so he contacted his show director, who now is a really good friend of mine. This, when I think back, it's so funny. People you didn't know then that you know now. And I sent my resume, and this is good olden days, like we didn't really have computers then. So I sent my resume off and, FedExed it and got a phone call and was interviewed. And I went just for a summer contract to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. And I worked for the summer in the theatrical services department. And we serviced all of the shows in the park. We used to have to go and green tag, and then sometimes we'd have to swing in and run tracks if a house technician didn't come into work that day. And then we'd have to red tag. So, got the full gamut of all of that in about a 10 or 12 week period. And then I went back to Buffalo to finish my degree in dance and technical theater, got my BA, and then headed back down to Williamsburg, and then just kind of never looked back. However, while I was in the Niagara Falls, Buffalo area, I did spend a summer at Darien Lake, which was not a Six Flags property then, but I believe it is now, right? So did spend a summer at Darien Lake, and I was on the concert and pyro crew. So I did pyrotechnics and also was a production assistant for all of the concerts that came through that venue that summer. It was a long summer. It was a good time though, the kind of, experience and the things that you are exposed to, those are not the kinds of things obviously you can get in a textbook. So I had a really good time doing that. And then of course, the next summer is when I went to Busch Williamsburg and had a great time, went back, finished my degree, and then headed back down to Williamsburg permanently, or I should say, then headed back to where I joined the company more on a regular basis. So I was really with Busch Entertainment Corporation, which now of course became SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, from really the summer of '96 until September of 2018.
Wow.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about now TCB Productions?
Sure. So in January of 2019, I formed my own company. It is an LLC, and that spun out of, I think some folks that knew me over the years where our paths had crossed, working on shows together, et cetera, throughout my time with Busch Entertainment and SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. And I had some folks reach out to me that were like, hey, are you able to do some consulting work? And so that idea kind of got planted, and I started thinking, and I was like, I guess they could just hire me to help wait a minute, maybe I should start my own LLC. So then I'm starting to establish some clients. And so that started in January of 19 and has really just been, quite honestly, I don't advertise. It's been word of mouth. It's been people that have known me from my past career that know that I'm doing some consulting work, that I am available. So I've had people reach out to me. And so I've had some clients across the states as well as right here in San Antonio. Again, very fortunate that I haven't advertised, but yet I seem to be pretty busy. So I do want to advertise. If anybody on here goes looking for my website, you're not going to find it because it hasn't been put together yet. So one of these days that will all happen, but there's a little part of me that feels like if I do really start advertising, I don't know that I can maintain a one-man ship, and I might have to start actually hiring regular people to work alongside, which would be great, because that means you're kind of growing, but it's also scary too, right? So TCB Productions, I really, it marries everything that I grew up doing, everything I learned to do throughout the course of my 22 years working directly in theme park. And so some of my clients are theme park, some are nonprofits like zoological institutions. And then also I'm doing some work with casino, and that's a lot of fun too. Casino entertainment, which again is different from anything in a theme park world, just because, you can kind of push the envelope a little bit more in a casino world than you can in theme park world, but still the same principles apply, right? People still want to be entertained. People want to have a good time no matter where they go. Of course, the pandemic has shifted things a little, but not so much that we can't still do some things that, people want a little break from reality. And I think as long as you're doing it safely, they welcome it,
Yeah. And I know that we definitely want to get into kind of what TCB has been doing during the pandemic, but first curious, just what does TCB Productions mean? What does that stand for? How'd you come up with that?
Well, I may have to test one of you on this call and see if you know what TCB actually stands for.
Is it
Matt?
taking care of business?
Thank you, Matt. Yes. And where does that come from, Matt?
Elvis.
Thank you. So, Josh, as I was deciding, like, okay, I'm going to start my own company. What am I going to call it? You know, and no offense to my husband at all, but this last name is a difficult name, right? So people know me and they know me by this name, but it's a hard name to kind of roll off the tongue, right? And so I started thinking about it, and all of a sudden it was like that. It just clicked. And so there are two connections here. So my father, who actually passed away in 2000, huge Elvis fan, huge. And my husband, Jeremy, is a huge Elvis fan. So like Elvis seems to always kind of follow me in some way, shape, or form. And somehow all of a sudden it just clicked. I'm like, oh, what about TCB Productions? And I'm like, surely that must be taken, right? Like something with the Elvis legacy, like there must be something. Nope. So TCB Productions LLC was what I was able to trademark or IP, right? And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. It's taking care of business. Some people know, and they know the reference and they understand that connection. Also, my Labrador retriever's name is Buddy. So sometimes I like to say it's taking care of Buddy. So there you go. But that's where that came from. There's really kind of this Elvis connection between my father having been an Elvis fan, my husband, myself as well. And I just really liked it. I just kind of was like, this rolls off the tongue. I like it. TCB Productions, taking care of business. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. So as Josh mentioned, we want to hear a little bit about kind of what has happened with TCB during the pandemic. We don't want to spend the entire time on that because we've got a lot of other things to get to, but can you just give us a sense of kind of what you've been doing or what you've been doing differently during this time?
Sure. So I would say first off, there's been no travel. So the biggest difference and the biggest difference is producing remotely, and being really clever and crafty about how do I do that and still have it be successful, have the client not feel the impact of like, okay, I'm not personally there, but luckily I have over the years, right, I have established a lot of connections around the country. And so, for example, one of my clients is in the state of New York, which again is my home state. So going there and going to be on site with them normally would not be an issue, except during a pandemic where some of the requirements trying to get into the state of New York for a long period of time was that you had to be 14-day quarantined before you then went to the property. So it's just not possible for me to be gone out of San Antonio for 3 weeks. So I was like, I can't do that. So luckily I was able to find some people who were in the state of New York that could be on site for installments and execution. So that's one way is, how do you get crafty about still being able to deliver what a client needs and what their expectation is, and being able to really just be so communicative and pre-planned in a way that whoever you have sort of going in to be your representative really knows what they're walking into and how to make sure they still achieve that. The other thing is some things have been, for example, auditions cannot be in person, right? So we punted and we did online auditions, which again, now seems like these things are no-brainers. Like, of course, why wouldn't we do those things? And, because some people feel like, well, you gain so much more when you see somebody face-to-face. Well, sure, but we have such video conferencing technology now that I think you still kind of get what somebody's personality is and if they're going to be a right fit for what it is you're casting for. So those were some changes in that, we had to audition. This was for a different client, but still, we had to audition via computer, online. And then honestly, because of time constraints and not knowing, okay, what's going on? When are we going to really open these shows? We're kind of we're in a holding pattern. I feel like, those flights sitting in Orlando when the thunderstorms are passing, you're just kind of in a holding pattern until, like, hey, we're going to green light. Okay, now we want to open this show in 3 weeks or whatever that is. So that one client, we auditioned online. We also started rehearsals online. So we did video conferencing and we did roundtable script reads, and we started rehearsals that way too, so that the cast was better prepared for when we said, okay, we're going to be there this Friday. I hope you guys are off book, because we've got like 3 days to put the show in. So that, changed some things. But I will say, I think a lot of those things, it forces you to think outside the box, but like in some cases you're working smarter too now, right? Because you can do these things in a more efficient way, in a more effective way, that also ultimately saves your client costs as well, because you're not now on extended travel where you're now in a city for 3 or 4 weeks. You're doing a lot of this work, pre-work, that involves folks. And then when you get there, it's more just like super efficient. Let's hit the ground. Let's get this knocked out in a couple of days. And especially during a pandemic, I'm very thankful to have clients that still have the resources to bring in a consultant, but also to be mindful of that. And how are we helping them to also be able to do that in a way that is still super financially efficient,
Yeah. What was that like, or I guess how natural was that transition from being able to do, the auditions and then rehearsals online? Or was there a moment where it felt like this just wasn't going to work at all until I guess the rest of the world started doing it online? And then, I don't know, was there that, okay, let's try it? Or curious as far as just how natural felt, not only for you, but also for the performers and the staff
Sure.
who are just so used to that in-person.
Honestly, I think it just seems smooth. Like, for example, the audition process, everybody waited in their room, their virtual room, until we kind of let them into the audition, which is very much the same if you go to a closed audition. Only the person auditioning is in the room. And then, the first couple rehearsals, it was a little clunky, just everybody kind of getting used to how the flow was going to be, but it wasn't so bad. And now these were acting rehearsals, so a little bit easier in terms of going through script, talking about character, talking about delivery. Now, I will say that if you asked me if I conducted a virtual dance rehearsal, I don't know that would have been as easy or as effective right out the gate. But I felt like this group, the one that I was a part of, went pretty smooth considering, so maybe it was just, everybody was just kind of in that mindset, and maybe they are still in the mindset like, okay, this is kind of the new way right now, to quote The Mandalorian, right? It is the way.
So Sharon, do you foresee some of these things becoming part of the new norm? Like, for example, the online auditions and the rehearsals, because they do save money, we can work a little smarter, even after the pandemic is kind of behind us?
I think so. Honestly, I think so. And also, I think that there are things that I would even recommend that to my client. Why fly somebody out to conduct an audition that might be 2 days and then fly them back, and then a month later we come back to start rehearsals? That just seems like, that to me seems like these are easy changes that ultimately help the client. And quite honestly, for the producer as well, or the person who's staging the show or writing the show, so often, we're working project to project to project. And now if you've got to carve out extra time because you have to get somewhere and fly somewhere and then come back or go to your next, there are ways that you also can kind of make that work even better for you, because you could be on remote somewhere and say, hey, I'm on remote in this place, but on my 1 day off, I'm going to do this other gig, but it just happens to be virtual. So I don't have to I don't have to fly anywhere. I think that there are lots of things like that are going to stick around or should stick around. And I mean, for me personally, I think some of those things I would recommend, because it saves the client money, and it saves time on the consultants, where, we know that expression, time is money, right? So if I'm sitting on a plane or I'm at home doing another job, what's the better for everybody all the way around,
Yeah. And even looking back at the things that were so normal, now that we're in this, sorry for doing this, but the new normal, or getting into that, then it almost kind of seems silly how much, we would do. I mean, I look at things that, that I would travel for, or that required at least in-person meetings. And I think, to think about the technology was here. You know, this was all here ready for us to be able to embrace. So
Yeah.
this was just, I guess, kind of this realization for so many aspects of our lives that we're able to, like you said, be more efficient on and work smarter on too. One of the things that we wanted to ask you is that you consider yourself an agent of change. And I think that's kind of a nice tie-in with all of that. And want to hear, you know, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good segue, right? So, absolutely. You know, I've been a part of things over the years where there may have been an established process, or there may be established procedures, or, you know, the way we did it yesterday needs to now change for tomorrow, you know, and how appropriate to have this conversation in the middle of a pandemic when we've all had to change how we've done everything, right? And so I would say that, you know, that expression about how people fear change, and change is hard, you know, change is hard for people. And over the years, I have been an individual that I don't like to be stagnant or become stagnant. And also, I don't like to accept that because something's always been done this way, that means it always has to be done that way. Now, I don't want this to sound like, you know, I'm somebody challenging a process every single time. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is, you know, stepping into a role and being able to assess, you know, maybe, for example, like we were just talking, how you conduct auditions, right? Or how you staff a plan appropriately to staff attractions in a park, or shows in a park, or looking at, hey, you know, we've offered this show and it runs 5 times a day, and that's just what we've done for years, and we're just going to keep doing that. Okay, but why? You know, are the numbers there? Is the audience there? Are we driving a per cap? Are there, you know, all those other things that you need to ask those questions on? And when I say I'm an agent of change, I mean that, you know, not only do I look for it, but I also embrace it. So, you know, a lot of times you get individuals in a room and we start talking about, hey, we've got to change. Something has to change. And, you know, whether that be an organizational structure, or whether that be like, you know, everybody's tightening their belts, you know, how do we find the, you know, sort of the acorns and like tighten, you know, try and help be efficient and look at the finances as a whole, but yet still deliver really great product. And I think I know, because I've been a witness to being in a room with people that over the years that struggled with, we can't do it. Well, we can't do it, you know, and I'm an observer also. So, you know, when I was kind of climbing the totem pole and I witnessed that kind of approach, you know, I just always kind of thought inside, well, maybe they know something I don't know. I mean, maybe we really can't do it that way. But then there's another little thing clicking in my head going, but I mean, there is a way to reinvent this. You know, we could do boop, 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 boop. And still, yeah, it might be a little different. And so, sure, maybe we can't deliver it exactly the way we've been delivering it, but we could deliver something new that ultimately achieves those goals. You could save money, you could reduce costs. Now you're putting maybe something new out there in front of the guests. And so to say you can't do something is just, I guess, it's just not a word that I hang on to. So, and so over the years, as like things would be happening around me, and I would sort of get tasked with things growing up through the ranks of, hey, Sharon, figure out how to do this, or, you know, we got to do this differently. Or now you're going to run these shows, but you have half the staff. I don't know, whatever that is. And it just always started to amount in, like, you know, I would see things in HR training or things I would read about that were about being an agent of, you know, you're a change agent, you know, and I thought, oh, well, maybe that's me. I'm a change agent. You know, I'm somebody being tasked with figuring out how to do things in a different way and, you know, delivering upon some of the challenges that people maybe before me or even laterally to me would be like, we can't do that. And to me, I can't accept that, because certainly as a leader, and you guys know, you know, as leaders, when you challenge your team to do things, you don't want them standing in front of you going, I can't do that, right? I mean, there's a reason why people get put in their roles. And part of that is because you recognize that they have ability to come back to the table with solutions, you know? And so I've just always, sort of been proud of the fact that I will find solutions, you know? So there you go, Josh. I don't know if that was too long of an answer, but you know, the whole pandemic has really forced everybody to figure things out, right? And not everybody is getting there. And I don't mean just in our industry. I mean, I've seen it across different industries where there are some organizations that are having a really hard time conducting virtual meetings and taking votes on things, and things of like, you know, board meetings where it's like, well, we always do this in person. Okay, but the world is different right now. So this is time to sort of reinvent, you know, if you have to rewrite your bylaws, whatever it is you have to do, but you can't just sit still and not do any work and not have anything happen, because when the world opens back up, now what? Are you going to be 16 months behind, or are you going to be 12 months behind? You know, that can't happen either. So
it's funny you mentioned, you know, a board and bylaws. I'm the secretary of our homeowners association. And I mean, we have a lot of people who would love if it would just stayed the way it was. And we have our annual meeting in October. And, but this year we actually did a virtual meeting for our homeowners association. And, you know, quite a few people embraced it. Not as many people showed up as to the normal one, but we kind of expected that. But the beauty was we could record it. Right. And then we could just make it available for everybody. But I want to get back to some things you were saying about, you know, being an agent of change, because, you know, I love what you're saying about, you know, just embracing kind of where you are and how do you make the best of it. There's that other side, though, of if you are a leader, how do you get other people to see that vision? Right. And you get the naysayers and the people say, we can't do that. How do you flip that script for them so that they're on board with the change?
yeah. Thanks, Matt, for making me really dig back into my, you know, because of course I experienced that over, you know, 20 something years of leading people in various capacities throughout my career, and then ending at SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment. I mean, my last 10 or 11 years there, my last 6 years, I was the head of the department. And so certainly I faced adversity a lot, you know, and how do you get people on board? When I walked into a shop, a scenic shop that they worked Monday through Friday, 7 to 3 all the time. That was what they did. And this is just an example, right? And so great. Now I have to get these people on board to realize we are going to exponentially tenfold increase the kind of work that we're doing in terms of events. You guys know. You cannot install an event while a park is open. So if a park is operational, when is that event being installed? Third shift, you know, who are the guys to do it? The scenic shop. And again, these were folks that were very much like, nope, we are Monday through Friday. And it was difficult to get that butter to churn. But I mean, so how do you do it? I mean, in some cases, my approach is always, you know, how do I get in there and let the folks see that, you know, I'm a team player, just like, you know, I'm in there with them. So a lot of times I would work those overnights, or I would be there late, or I would do whatever it was they needed of me. You know, sometimes people don't want the boss around, so I recognize that. I would be the person who, you know, if they needed like somebody to go do a 2 a.m. coffee run, that was me. Like, let me go get you guys what you need. So little by little, it just started to, after about a year or two, and that was many years ago, but after about a year or two, I think it just became like people realized, okay, this is our world, we're in it, you know, and this is how we are supporting what's happening in the park. And, you know, that's just kind of one example of like, you know, sort of getting in there and me showing that I wouldn't ask you to do anything I'm not capable of doing myself or wouldn't do myself. I can't say I have all those capabilities, but at least be there and be a support unit for them. And so, you know, that's one way. And then the other way, quite honestly, among us, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to tell people like, you know, I don't want to say, Matt, if you're going to bring it up or not bring it up, but, you know, suck it up, sister. Like at some point in time, you just have to just say, look, you know, we're adults, we work, the job has shifted. And, you know, we want you on the ship with us. We want you moving with us. But if you're an individual who doesn't want to accept the way things are changing, or you don't like the way the workflow is, or whatever those things are, then that's a different discussion, and it's a hard discussion, but it is a different discussion.
Yeah. So we would love to hear more about the phrase "suck it up, sister." Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. So as most people know, or as I think, when you grow up through an industry, especially this industry, and if you're fortunate enough, like I was, to start, in what we call a line level position, an entry level position, and continue to kind of work up the way there. When I got my promotion to go from Busch Williamsburg out to SeaWorld San Antonio, I came up to San Antonio as the director of production, director of creative. And I was very much, when I was in a manager and a supervisory role, I was very much a doer, execute, 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 and be out in the field and doing. And somebody above me was giving us that direction or giving us a punch list or telling us what we needed to do. And now I'm in a director level role where I have to be the person who's also establishing what it is we have to get done, creating those punch lists, giving the team the resources to be successful. But now you got to step back. You're not the person out there anymore also doing it with them, right? That's why you have other people that are doing those things. And certainly I would fill a gap if they needed a gap. But, it was difficult to make that flip, right? It's difficult to make that flip from middle management to upper management, and recognizing that you have to delegate, and what you're doing is just as important as what they're doing. And while, what you're doing is the pre-planning and the process and getting everything ready, so when you do download your team, they can execute and be successful, and you have to move on to the next thing. So with that, it was hard to make that flip. And I think some of it too was just personal. Like I enjoyed being out there and being in the field and installing scenery or rehearsing shows or, choreographing show, whatever it took to like get a show up and running. And now I'm in executive level role, and I'm feeling the pressure of, okay, we're in meetings all day long. We're in finance meetings. We're in budget review meetings. We're in strategic meetings. We're talking about what we're going to do 5 years from now. Marketing needs information for 2 years from now. I mean, whatever those things are. And then on top of it, in the evenings, we're in major install mode, And so it was like, how do I balance my day? And I'm not getting any work done. I felt like I wasn't getting any work done, and working just from whatever time to whatever time, which is fine because I am a workaholic. But there were two peers and myself, okay, so this is early on in my senior executive management career, that they also were kind of newly promoted into their level as well. And we were all feeling it like, oh my gosh, we go from meeting to meeting to meeting and we can't get any work done. How do we get any work done? And believe it or not, this is well before smartphones. So like, this is back when like you actually took notes in a meeting and then you went back and you actually typed up your notes, right? I mean, we weren't as efficient as we are now. And the three of us were talking, and they were like, oh, maybe we can just ask our VP at the time. Maybe we can just ask him that we just not have meetings on Fridays. Can we not have meetings on Fridays? And that's our day to catch up. And yeah, okay, so we're going to go into our next meeting, and Sharon, you bring it up. Okay, so I was the one who got nominated to bring it up. So we're sitting there, and I said, hey, so we were talking, and this is a good 15 years ago, okay? And we were talking, and we were hoping that maybe we could declare Fridays no meeting Friday, because we're meeting Monday through Thursday and we have all these meetings, and we're not finding any time to get our work done, and we don't know when we're going to get our work done, so we really need Friday as a catch-up day. And I kid you not, and this person looked at me and he said, suck it up, sister, you're an executive now. And I just looked at him, and he was like, this is where you figure out how do you get your work done, and he just kind of, and it wasn't in a mean way at all, but it stuck with me. And then the other thing that stuck with me is my two compadres sitting there, leaving me all alone, not even like, speaking up, like, let's just let Sharon deal with this, But that story, it has always stayed with me. And I've told a few friends of mine, and they get a kick out of that story. And I'm like, now I've gotten older, and I'm not saying it's a mean thing to say to people, but sometimes you do have to say to people like, suck it up. Like you're an executive. You need to figure out how do you get all this stuff done. You're delegating, you're on top of things for your team, but then you're also forward thinking, it's just kind of, you wouldn't be in that role if somebody didn't recognize that you were capable of handling it. And so it was kind of like, he said that and I kind of snapped out of it and I was like, oh yeah, he's right. Time to suck it up.
Yeah. That's so funny. So I've always felt that transition from kind of the doer to the thinker or the planner was a really tough transition.
Very tough.
Right. And you kind of articulated that. So what were some of the things besides being just told to suck it up? What were some of the things that you did to make that transition successful? So whether it's, managing your time differently or delegating more, what were some of those kind of tactical things that made that transition?
Oh my gosh. I don't know that I fully made the transition, Matt. I can say back then, because we were growing so fast and we were putting so much into the park here in Texas specifically, that I just had to, well, number one, so I'm the kind of person, if I recognize a gap, I pick it up, right? If I recognize like, hey, nobody's working on that, I'm going to pick that up. So ultimately what happened was we started realizing there were way too many of those times happening. And so we added some staff to be able to, for me to delegate those things to. And so then what I would do is, usually weekly, be checking in with the team. And then of course, if it was getting into like a major event install, then usually we're checking in daily, probably 2 weeks before an opening. And I think, I'm also the kind of person who I never liked to go home with something on my to-do list, right? Like at the end of my day, if I hadn't scratched off everything on the to-do list. So I was struggling with that too, in terms of, when you move up the ladder and now, you have to kind of let go of some of these other things. I was also struggling with the fact that I would leave and not have every single thing done on my to-do list. And it was waiting on me. And I had a peer who said to me one day, because I was stressing about not getting all my stuff done. And she said, Sharon, there's always going to be things to do. And I'm like, what? And she said, there's always going to be things to do. Like, you don't beat yourself up because you didn't get every single thing done. She was like, do you know how many times I have a plan and I can't even touch that plan because something else happens that, shoots me off in another direction. So I started to learn that I built in time. So what I did was I built in time in my schedule, and I would block chunks of time that I actually labeled catch-up time. And then I also knew it was there. So like if somebody needed to have a meeting with me from another department or whatever, and it was time sensitive, then I knew that I could like take away from my catch-up time and be like, oh yeah, we can have a meeting this afternoon or whatever that needed to be. And then I wasn't feeling as stressed or anxious, like I'm not going to get to all this work. Like I was blocking out chunks of time, and I still do that. Like it's just kind of one of my organizational tools that I block out chunks of time. And also for my own brain, because I don't want to say I'm scatterbrained. I'm not scatterbrained, but my brain does start to think about multiple different things and different projects. And so once I map it out on a calendar, it's like, okay, Sharon, stop worrying about it because you're going to get to that at 2:00 today. It's kind of one of those things. So I would say being able to organize my calendar a little bit stronger, also building in float, like it's the same thing in a project, right? I built in float within my work week for the unplanned, and again, you guys know, managing people, anything can happen, right? Now you've got to deal with whatever's going on, that you've got to now sit down and have a counseling session or whatever those things are, or just be a shoulder for someone or help them prioritize, all those things are the unplanned. And so I really just went in and was blocking more time in my day to catch up or manage the unplanned and then not feel so stressed myself.
I appreciate that. I think time management is, I think, just such a huge critical issue for all of us. So I always love to hear these like organizational or efficiency, sometimes life hacks or time blocking out, those specific things. Curious, actually, if we can maybe even go a little deeper into that. And that's how you know what, how much time to block off, or knowing, you're organizing to say, anticipating the unknowns and knowing what you can do to get yourself completely distraction free for the time that you've blocked out for these specific areas. I was watching a webinar a couple of months ago, and the guy leading it was talking about how he was writing a book, and he was talking to like the other members of his staff about why he can't be interrupted. And he said that the thoughts that I have in this book, they're at the bottom of the ocean. So I need to get in my submarine and go down to the bottom of the ocean, where I need to stay there for a while. And when you knock on my door, call me or text me, and then come back up and then have to go back down. And so curious about kind of your process for completely, I would say, getting to the bottom of the ocean and staying there.
Wow. I love that analogy. So first off, I will look at the week ahead and like really 2 weeks ahead. And it really kind of just depends. It's so project specific. If I know that somebody else's work is contingent upon me delivering something to them in time, I make that a priority. And it's all about critical path, right? So if I'm working on a project where something's opening on a Thursday and it's 2 weeks out, but we have to get all this stuff to the print shop because they need at least 7 days to get their stuff printed to be able to get it to us in time. So it's really about sort of dissecting every bit of what's going to get you to be completed and then work backwards from there. But also within it, what's my responsibility to it? Is it one thing where I just check in with somebody and then they say, yep, we're good, we're on a good path, we're going to have everything to you Friday? Or are people waiting on me so that they can be successful? So that's kind of part of my process. The other part is, like you said, about getting to the bottom of the ocean. If I am seriously like, now I'm really like, okay, I have to buckle down and I have to get a script done. Let's say, for example, writing a script. What I will do is literally I put my phone in airplane mode, because we are so tethered, right? We're so tethered. And if I don't put it in airplane mode, I will just on regular, I'm sure everybody does it, right? Like within 10 minutes, if I haven't touched it, I pick it up and I look at it. And now if I see text messages, it totally distracts me. It pulls me up to the surface, right, Josh? And now I've got to get my head back into like, what was I doing and where was I going? I'm writing a script. So I will literally put my phone in airplane mode, and I'll let my husband know, because that to me is like the only individual that would be reaching out with such a crisis emergency that would be what pulls me out of the bottom of the ocean. But I feel like I know me, like if I do that, I can buckle down and get so much more done in a 2-hour period of time than if I let that thing keep ringing and, text messages coming in and everything else. And in some cases, it's not even important stuff, but it pulls your attention and your focus, right? So I think the couple of things are, I look at a project, I prioritize based on the project, based on what the people helping me need to be successful and what I have to get to them. So it's all about critical path. And then when it's me turning inward, like, okay, Sharon, now it's time for you to get all of your stuff done. I have to block out that device. I can't. And I will turn off my email, because that's the other thing too. If you're working on your laptop and now your email pings keep coming in, that's another distraction as well. And I feel like, if people haven't heard from me for 2 hours, it's okay. So I think really good blocked, whatever it is you need personally, is that 1 hour a day? Is that 2 hours a day? There's no formula that works for everybody, right? It's whatever certain people need.
Yeah, I love that. It's not a one size fits all type of situation. When you said, I know me, that really spoke to me, because there's things that I know I can do. I could put my phone in airplane mode and be more productive as well. So I think that's fantastic. I'd love to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about your work with the San Antonio Visitors Alliance, because that is something that takes some of your time and some of your effort. So can you kind of walk us through kind of that process and what you do with it?
Sure. So I was fortunate enough to interview for a position that was the president and CEO for the San Antonio Visitor Alliance. And I got that position in August of 2019. And I stepped in after an individual who chose to retire, but had been in the role and actually created the role and really created the association over almost a 20-year period, right? So it was quite a legacy. Having been in and around hospitality and tourism my whole life, something I didn't even talk about. When I grew up in Niagara Falls, I used to work in the hotel industry and also worked at a smaller FEC in that location. And then I went on to work at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, where it just never occurred to me like, oh, you're in the tourism industry or you're in the hospitality and tourism industry. Like it just, working in hotels where I grew up, it was, to me at that point, it was the job I had in between college, right? Like it never occurred to me like this is your career path. So when this job came to be, and I really was looking back on my work history, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have been in the hospitality and tourism industry my entire adult career. And so this is a membership-based organization. At the time, there were 2 individuals, the president and then a staff member, and then made up of membership. And that membership consists of hoteliers, restaurateurs, the attractions and leisure industry, a lot of FECs, plus a couple of the major theme parks that are here in San Antonio. There are some DMCs, direct marketing agents, right, that are part of the group that are also, folks who market destination marketing. And of course, there's a connection to some other associations across the city. So at first I was like, okay, yep, I have knowledge base of the industry. I've worked firsthand in the industry. I've worked in the hotel business. I've worked in a restaurant business. I've worked in theme park business, so that all lended itself to me feeling, more confident to be able to step into that role. And then of course, my years of experience with associations, having been a member of IAPA for so long, serving on committees, even being a chair of the committee, I felt like I understood, sort of the good mix of all that, the blend of that. And the other side that I really have had to study up a lot on, as you guys know, in the association side of things, is the lobbying political side of what goes along with that. So that is definitely an area where I wasn't as familiar, but I'm getting much more familiar. So I stepped into the role in August of 19 and quickly had to execute some initiatives that are normally fourth quarter initiatives. So they had sort of gotten started, but then I had to, run with them. So we got to December, whatever, and then it's the holiday. Oh, have a good Christmas, everyone. Then January, February rolls around, and it's really sort of that beginning of a membership campaign, which in any association world, really, you should kind of start that membership campaign in like October, November, but so membership campaign, kind of figuring out what was our year going to be, laying out the year, trying to do a lot more member-driven events because that was some of the stuff we had heard from feedback from the membership. And then COVID hit. And because this is a hospitality, travel, tourism association, and our members were 100% impacted, we were 100% impacted. So unfortunately, it was just like hitting the ground running, heading into, all of a sudden March hit. It's spring break in Texas in March. So, we were just starting spring break when everything was starting to happen around the country. And our mayor locally had declared like a safety state of emergency right at the beginning of spring break. And of course, you all know, having come from attractions, knowing that how important spring break is to the businesses. So it was difficult. And it's still difficult. I have had to, since then, lay off my one staff member. So it is now a one-man band. And also because our resources are thin, I also had to reduce down to part-time. Now, with that being said, I'm okay with that because our members are, like I said, they're 100% impacted. And I just, as an empathizer, I just thought, how could we not be impacted? Our membership base is completely impacted. And we are also, as a direct correlation to that, we have been impacted. And, my goal and my commitment to them that I've said all along is that I am committed to get us to the other side of this. And so by doing that, the way to do that is to really, how do I spread the resources we have as long as we can? And one of those ways of doing that is I had to reduce to part-time. But that's okay, because if I wouldn't have done that, then I might not be here for the membership today, right? The organization wouldn't really be here. And so the way now I've stretched it out let's hope we have more revenue come in. But if no revenue comes in, if there's no membership dues, if there's no fundraising opportunities, et cetera, I feel confident that we will at least get until third quarter of 21, which hopefully by then is when we're seeing things start to turn around anyway in the industry. It's been devastating. I mean, there's no other way to say that. The hospitality, travel, and tourism industry and the entertainment industry, both of which have been hit the hardest through what's been going on in the world.
Can you expand a little bit on the resources and what you've been able to provide for your members who are the businesses that have been, like you said, 100% impacted by the pandemic?
So initially, there was a lot of work connecting with Texas Travel Alliance, which used to be known as the Texas Travel Industry Association. They changed names in the middle of a pandemic. That's probably never a good idea. But the Texas Travel Alliance, connecting with them and being able to help promote to the governor, like locally here in Texas, about how, for example, as phases were happening and as things were being defined in terms of these businesses can reopen in phase 1 and these businesses can reopen in phase 2. And of course, you guys were hearing this, and, a lot of the legislative folks around the country were really, all eyes were on Orlando. It's like, well, what's Orlando doing? We're just going to wait and see what Orlando's doing. And, we locally, there was a lot of push to our Governor Abbott here in Texas. And really the Six Flags Corporation led that charge because their home office is in Dallas, right? So they've got a lot of properties in the state of Texas, let alone around the country. And they put together a really robust plan that proved, or I should say, gave confidence to the governor that the theme parks could reopen safely, right? So you've got, and some of that, and I don't want to say that other entities weren't opening safely. It's just that it wasn't apples to apples, right? So malls are reopened again, or churches were reopened, but theme parks can't reopen when they're outdoors. And we know that we can achieve a 6-foot distance, or, we know that we can control capacity and all of those things. So not only for membership is being able to sort of be a part of and be on the front line of trying to communicate that up, but then communicating that out to the membership base of like, hey, here's where these things stand. It has been, you ask about what resources we were able to provide members, it's been difficult because in a year when they need us more than ever, we're thinner than we've ever been. So, and I think, maybe other associations would say the same thing. You've got folks that have had to lay people off, and they've had to now, certain responsibilities are now absorbed by one person, and now one person's doing 4 jobs. But your membership base needs you now more than ever, right? They need us to lobby, or they need us to get things in front of Congress and get things on Capitol Hill to be voted on. And, if there was an additional federal stimulus, all these things that we keep trying to be the cheerleaders for and the champions in the business for our membership. And, how you do that and continue to do that and tell membership you're doing those things, but yet, you're significantly reduced. It's been a challenging year. So I would say, from my perspective, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. If IAPA is already working on an initiative that is, please write your congressman, please take this and, email this to your congressman. I'm taking that type of communication and I'm sharing it out to our membership base that may not be IAPA members, right? So it's still, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is how can we increase the federal assistance that's coming to industries or to cities or to the government, et cetera, to the state. And that's, one way of doing that is how can I sort of keep an eye on all the other associations and what they're doing, and how can I share that with our membership base? So that's one thing. And then also trying to think ahead where, a lot of the members, and as they should be, they're so focused on the day-to-day because they have to be, right? They're focused on their P&L. They're managing their P&L more closely and so tight than they ever have. So for me to be somebody who's thinking about, okay, but 6 months from now, what kind of what kind of, we produce a brochure, which, can you believe it? Yes, a brochure, an actual printed document. There is a companion website, but I'm telling you, when you live in a drive market, because we are a drive market, San Antonio, that brochure is it has a strong return for the folks that participate in it, you know, and it's hard for them to think about in August when I start talking about next year's brochure. And, you know, and I have to sort of be that person to remind them, like, hey guys, we know this year was the anomaly and it's a tough year, but I'm going to ask you to look at 5 years worth of data and make your decision if you're going to participate again for 21, because the market will come back, right? It will come back. Travel and tourism will come back. The drive-in overnight market is what's going to bounce back first, right? For sure. We've been seeing that, you know, when shelter in place got lifted, and this was back in early June when businesses were allowed to reopen, a lot of their traffic was drive and overnight, and it was folks coming from Austin or Houston. And so, you know, that drive market will be strong, and it will be stronger for sure sooner than, unfortunately, the destination markets.
Yeah, Sharon.
I kind of went on a tangent. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No. That's okay. Because I really appreciated, you know, your message about things will come back. You know, some things will come back a little sooner, but ultimately, I think we're in an industry that people want, and as Josh said, is essential to so many people, not only for, you know, our jobs, but for the vast majority of the public who come to our facilities for escapism and to have a good time and to be with their family. So I think that's a kind of a great kind of lasting message. So we are kind of running short on time. This is flown by. So Sharon, thank you so much for your time today. If people wanted to learn more about you or TCB Productions, where would you send them?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think we've already established the fact that I don't have a website because I just haven't set it up yet. And there is a really bad Facebook page right now that has no content on it. So I would say that if they wanted more information, they could email. It's tcbproductionsllc@gmail.com.
Perfect. Perfect. We will put that in the show notes so everybody can email you at will. So again, Sharon, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. And for everybody out there watching and listening, we are all Attraction Pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.